So there definitely were dinosaurs, and um, uh, the interesting thing is that dinosaurs are not just kind of like um, a super big kind of lizard because um, there are small dinosaurs, of course, right? The big ones are the most famous ones, but they're also small ones. So they're kind of a unique category in themselves. They're probably warm-blooded, not cold-blooded, and there are a lot of them which have feathers. I think the evidence for feathered dinosaurs is pretty good. Now the question is, why do they have feathers? And the answer to that is found in biblical symbolism, because birds represent angels. That's why fallen angels are represented by unclean birds. We find that there are birds who dwell in the tabernacle and the temple. They are clothed in glorious garments of feathers, just as priests, which represent angels, are clothed in garments of glory and beauty. Well, dragons are also representations of heavenly beings.
Right.
That is why the serpent is a kind of dragon. He's called Leviathan, the twisting serpent. And there's a sea dragon and there's a land dragon. The sea dragon is described as Leviathan, who represents Satan.
Nessie.
But it can also represent good angels. And then there's Behemoth, who represents the land dragon. And I do, in fact, think Behemoth was probably a dinosaur. But the thing is with dinosaurs, and this is, I'm not going to come down hard on this one, but it seems to me that there are some credible modern dinosaur sightings. And here's the reason I think so, about particularly pterodactyls. Pterodactyl sightings happen in specific places. So if this was just people, they thought they saw something that they saw on like National Geographic Channel, you wouldn't expect it to correlate with any specific location. Because why would people in Oregon or whatever be more interested in dinosaurs than people in Virginia? Second of all, why is it that the pterodactyls that they see actually are not the pterodactyls, which is kind of the stereotypical National Geographic pterodactyl? It is actually another species, which I think it has a short tail. I would want to double check exactly the detail I'm speaking of, but it is a pterodactyl we know existed from the fossil record. But it's not the one you see on like the cover of magazines or whatever. Yet those are the ones which people keep reporting and seeing. Just details like that would seem to be easier to explain if there are small populations which continue to exist in the modern world. A good source for this is actually, if you want to go look at 19th and 18th century like newspaper clippings, because there were more populations at that point in time and people would talk about them. Like in rural parts of England, dragons were a pest. It's such a kind of like everyday mundane description of what was going on. People would shepherd. No, there was this pest that they had to go out. They had to send someone to kill it because it would eat the sheep. That's what we St. George and the dragon and whatever.
AKA Chupacabra, AKA Nessie, and St. George killed Nessie.
I have a take on Chupacabra actually. I think so with cryptozoology we want to have two different categories. We want to have first, like, there's unknown animals, but second there's kind of spiritual beings, right? So paranormal beings. So we have, in terms of Bigfoot sightings, I think those actually distribute pretty neatly into two categories. There seem to be some kind of unknown ape out there, but then there are also sightings which they have these weird paranormal characteristics. Chupacabra, in terms of like eating blood and stuff, that is something which has a lot of symbolic resonance, because the serpent will eat dust and man returns to dust, so the serpent eats the dying, so Satan is a roaring lion seeking whom he might devour. So when you see in like cryptozoological stuff, you have these beings which seem to resonate with biblical symbolism, and they're described by people who don't know anything about the Bible, which suggests that there's something going on there. But yeah, so I do think dinosaurs, certainly they're real. And there are small populations which I think are still around. But the interesting thing about the dinosaurs that we see after the flood is that Noah seems to have taken smaller representatives of every created kind, because you would fit more on the ark that way. So if you look at the early Cenozoic fossil record, which is the post-flood fossil record, you will find pretty much the earliest representative of any created kind you're talking about, whether it's cats or whether it's canines or whatever, or horses, is a very small version of all of these things. And it's just an interesting little detail which seems, I think, to make sense in terms of the biblical narrative, where you have to take into account those practical concerns in terms of the ark. So the biggest dinosaurs, I think, are larger representatives of a created kind which Noah took on the ark, but they don't exist after the flood.